This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here each Sunday, nationwide, coast to coast. And now we're actually excited to announce we are now on iHeartRadio. So you can now, if that's easier for you and you're already an iHeart subscriber, you can listen to us over on iHeartRadio. So, and also we do have the podcast. We are now been doing this for 12 years. We just started season 13 last March. We're well into the 13th season, and appreciate a number of you who have dropped me emails kind of, collecting as a badge of honor that you've gone back and found episode 1, which I would not recommend anybody go watch. It was recorded in a bathroom at a Marriott resort in Phoenix, Arizona, March 5th of 2005. It was an experiment, but it turned out pretty well. We're here now 13 years later. So as you know, the show's about innovation, creativity, and design. We talk about a whole wide range of topics. We like to bring guests in who bring kind of maybe it's a little different thought process. We've had some great guests here, a good string of them, and we're going to continue that string today with a new guest who kind of has a little bit of a different type of story around the whole issue around leadership and entrepreneurship. So I don't want to steal his thunder, so let's bring Joshua in. So Joshua, thank you for taking time out of your busy day on Sunday. This is Joshua Spodek. He is a official rocket scientist, so I'm going to qualify that. Actually, I've had Gretchen McLean, who was the chief director of the International Space Station, was on the show about a month ago. So I think I'm running the string of physicists or NASA people on the show here. I don't know if that says anything about me and my interest or what. But so Joshua, thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to join us here on the show. Appreciate that.
It's my pleasure to be here. You're making me miss back when I was building satellites.
Well, go listen to the Gretchen McLean episode. It's killer. I've known her for almost 20 years. Former chief director at NASA, phenomenal. And NASA has kind of this reputation of kind of being kind of that spark and, for creativity and for innovation. So let's get a little bit of your background, because where you started to where you are today is completely different. So walk us through where'd you grow up at?
Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia, and I spent the first roughly 18 years of my life there. And but actually, it's funny, my parents met in India, and my older sister was born there. So we did have a bit of international traveling growing up. Since I'm going to jump forward all the way to when I started doing physics, because when I was in school, in high school, I did okay in math and science without trying too hard. But I was really nerdy and geeky, and I was trying to hide this part of me because socially it wasn't very effective.
You wanted to conform. You didn't want to stick out.
Yeah, I wanted to have friends. I mean, I wasn't the biggest geek in the world, but I held my own. And when I started college, I didn't really study much math or science, but I took a year off in between my sophomore and junior years. And when I came back, I had much more resolve. And I decided, I like physics. This is something that I want to do. I know that it's not the most socially advanced, awesome thing to do, but I like it, and I'm going to do it. And it led me to ultimately get my PhD in physics. In astrophysics, and I helped build a satellite. So some of my funding came from NASA, some of it came from ESA, which is the European Space Agency. And, partway through is when I realized that as much as I loved physics, and I should say I still love physics, the life of a researcher wasn't really, in this day and age, it's not like sitting there in like Rutherford, put the detector over there and we'll discover the nucleus. It's like teams of tens of thousands of people coming from dozens of countries on projects that take dozens of years. And for me as a graduate student, it was like a lot of debugging, and I wasn't really into debugging. It wasn't really physics to me. Anyway, so some friends of mine from undergrad were separately meeting to get together to see if they could come up with a company, because it was the mid-90s at this point. And they approached me and they said, we've been getting together for beers. Do you want to get together? Because we haven't come up with any ideas. And if you help us, we can do something. And if not, we'll have some beer. And so how could I say no? And so we met a bunch of times, and I came up with an idea that ultimately we went with. One of the guys moved to Boston to get married, but the other one and I co-founded the company. And I had the idea in 96. We got our first fund, applied for the first patent in 98, got our first funding in 99, got our first big contract in 2000, went live in 2001. Just briefly, this invention that I came up with was to put boxes on the walls of subway tunnels so that when the train goes by, if you look outside the window, it looks like there's a movie screen outside the subway car window. And so the idea was to put it ideally like underneath Times Square, and you get all these people. It's a very highly population dense place with no other ads, and this was going to be animated. So if I'll just continue if you want.
Yeah, keep going. No, keep going.
So the idea worked really great. Working with subway systems was difficult, and post 9/11 became virtually impossible. Just to take anything in the subway tunnels was very, very difficult to do. And then we had the bubble bursting, and even though we weren't a .com, the bubble bursting still affected us, and the revenues really dropped. And so all the stuff that I was great at, of being able to solve the complex problems of the physical problems of how to make this technology work, I was great at that. I mean, I was okay. We hired, obviously, the physics I was really good at. We hired really great engineers to build the stuff. But when things weren't going well, I didn't have, looking back now, I know that I didn't have the skills to work with people in difficult times. And ultimately, that was much more important. So I got squeezed out by the investors in the early 2000s, and ultimately decided I really loved being an entrepreneur. I loved coming up with an idea and having people buy into the dream and work for, sales and stuff like that. So I went back to business school actually, when I was in graduate school in physics at Columbia, the physics building and the business school building are almost next door to each other. So I was actually sneaking across to audit classes there. So when I went to apply, I'd already taken a few classes at the school, so I got in pretty quickly. And that's where business school is where I learned that there were classes in leadership and classes in entrepreneurship. I thought, like most people, either you're born with it or you're not. That's what I thought. I don't believe that for a second anymore. I think that's one of the huge myths that holds people back.
But yeah. back onto the physics thing. This is, you jokingly teased it a little bit about, in school you kind of kept your nerdiness to yourself because you wanted to have friends.
I tried to. It got out.
But even in college, when look, I've got loads of PhDs who worked for me when I was CTO at HP, and I've got a load of PhDs that work for me now. And one of the common things I hear from people that have like really deep technical knowledge is that missing kind of social emotional skills, social leadership, right? Even you talk about physics problems now being hundreds of people around the world coming together to work on projects. Do you think that there's something totally missing in the educational model system then for those that typically you don't think of it as leadership, needing leadership skills, but they need to have some leadership capabilities?
Yes, I think that it's one of my great motivations. And in fact, one of the big decisions I made when I started deciding to teach is, do I want to take on the educational system, which is a big challenge? I ultimately chose that I want to deliver the best education I can to the students and my students and clients. But yeah, I mean, when I go in front of PhDs and graduate students, I often will say to them, you've heard of, do you feel trapped like I did? Like I felt like I could either go into industry, I could go to Wall Street, or I could keep doing what I was doing, and I didn't like any of those options. And I felt like, what else can I do with a PhD in physics? And so a lot of times I get brought to speak to PhDs and graduate students and people like that. And I say, do you feel trapped? And a lot of them say, yes, that's why we brought you here. And I say, about Zuckerberg and Gates and Dell and all these people who started their own thing. And they go, yeah. And I go, they went and did what they wanted to do, and they could take it as far as they wanted. They could do anything they wanted. And they go, yeah. And I say, you have more education and you feel like you have fewer options. Isn't that the opposite of what an education is for? I felt the same way. And one of the things that I'm so passionate about is that I spent years and years, even after business school taught me theory of leadership, but it wasn't actually the practice of leadership. And it wasn't until I started studying how to teach that I started picking up that how you teach is as important as what you teach. And so I feel really passionate about giving people the skills that, look, I don't claim to be the Dalai Lama in terms of, emotional skills or Johnny Depp in terms of social skills, but I'm way farther ahead than I was. And I think having learned it so late in life, I think I'm pretty good at teaching it. In the way that when you learn a language later in life, you know the rules that you don't when you learn it natively.
Exactly. And we're going to come back to that right after. We're going to take this quick commercial break. And Josh, I got some stories on some PhDs that work for me that have stumbled through the same problems you stumbled. So I'm going to make sure they listen to this show. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. We're going to continue our conversation with Joshua Spodek. So don't go anywhere. We're going to take just this real quick commercial break. Got to pay some bills. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio. This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. Before we hop back into this segment, just need to do a quick shout out to Zoom. Zoom is the sponsor for this segment of the show. Zoom provides us with all of the video collaboration technologies that we use to bring the guests in so that we can have these visitors from literally all over the world come in and share their expertise, their perspectives, their thoughts on innovation, creativity, and design. Now, you've heard me talk about Zoom, now for months. They've been a sponsor now going on 5 months now, I think. I've been using them for almost a year and a half now. I use it literally every day with my day job where I'm CEO. Talk to my team around the globe using Zoom. It just works everywhere. If you haven't tried it, try it out. Zoom is going to give you a free account. Just hop over to killinnovations.com/Zoom. They'll give you a free account that will allow you to host video collaboration calls with up to 50 participants. 50 participants, free account. Go try it out. Trust me, you are going to fall in love with it. So let's pick up the conversation with Joshua Spodek. We were talking about in the first segment, Joshua, a little bit of your background of, being a PhD in physics to now going off and becoming an entrepreneur from that standpoint of getting kind of that entrepreneurial itch for recognizing that you actually can control the things that you want to do, but your experience with your first company, though, didn't turn out quite the way you thought it was going to turn out, which then led you into start looking at what are the skill sets for leadership. So let's pick it up there at that point.
Sure. Yeah. It was really I didn't really. It's hard. What's hard for me to say right now is that do I present it how I saw it at the time, or do I present it how it looks now? Because at the time, I felt like, as a physicist, I knew how to analyze problems and break them down, a big problem into little problems, each of which I could do. And I thought, that's what I'll do. And so when times got tough, I thought, well, I'll tell this person to do this person to do that, this person to do that, and that person to do that. And they'll all do what I tell them to do. When times are tough, people are sending out their resumes. And when I come out and say, you do this and you do this, and I've even asked them what they want to do, they just send out more resumes. That's what I know now. And what I wish I'd known at the time was how to work with, how to understand what's motivating them to be there in the first place and how to get them to feel a part of a team. That's not an analytical skill. That's not a problem solving. It's a problem solving skill, but it's much more working with people and being able to, the emotion, the skills, their empathy and compassion and being able to create meaning and value, importance and purpose. And I didn't know any of that before. Even in business school, I learned that those things were important, but not how to do them.
So you went back and you actually went back to get your MBA then after you had your first startup experience, correct?
Yeah.
And did what you learned through the process of an MBA, was that sufficient to fill this gap?
Well, I would say, looking back now, I would say it was, for me, essential because I didn't know any other place to get those skills. But I got really lucky because I went into business school to learn the hard skills accounting and finance, stuff like that, because I saw the money running out. I figured money, that's the issue. But that was just the symptom. And then when I went out to practice what I learned, it was as if I was learning all over from scratch again. So I learned, because how did I learn in business school? There were some interactive classes, but it was much more lecture, case study, reading psychology papers, writing papers. And case studies are interesting in that you can learn about an experience, but it's not your experience. And it's interesting to talk about values in general, but it's really your values. That's the real challenge. And it's nice to know of what it's like that people go into difficult situations, but the real challenge is when you go into a complicated situation and your emotions start going through the roof, what do you do? And if what you're trying to do is remember what you read in a book or wrote in a paper or heard a classmate say, that's not going to be nearly as effective as falling back on things that you actually did. And so that's what, once I started coaching people and once I started leading workshops, then I started seeing that what I was doing wasn't I was trying to do better what people did with me, which is to make a better lecture. Ultimately, I learned about experiential project-based learning, and I recognized that the field of leadership is much less an academic pursuit like, I don't know, history or philosophy. I'm not a historian or philosopher, so they might be, I don't know this, but I think of them as like much more not so active. But leadership is active, it's social, it's emotional, it's expressive, and it's performance-based.
So how do you shift then from a teaching style from the traditional MBA school, case study, tear through the financials, memorize this, to the model that you're projecting? How different is that?
Well, there are a couple of big things that happened. One was I noticed, for me, it came through watching Inside the Actor Studio, which, it's an entertainment TV show. I just watched because I enjoyed it. But I noticed that a lot of the actors had the skills that I was trying to develop. I don't know if they know how to balance a balance sheet, but they know how to connect with people emotionally and socially. And they were off the charts in that. I mean, certainly stronger than people I knew with MBAs, and certainly more than my leadership professors. And then I started noticing a lot of them on the show dropped out of school. And I thought, this is really weird, because I was, Ivy League business school. These guys are better than anyone in the world that I was in. So how do I make sense of that? And I learned that they didn't leave education. They left traditional mainstream education to something more of a, acting style of learning, which turns out is the same as how we learn how to play a musical instrument. It's the same as how we learn to play sports or how to do the military, which is you start with the basics, the fundamentals, and you practice and you practice and you practice. And when you master that level, you go up to another level and you practice and practice and practice and move up to the next level. And what was missing from leadership was the scales, the musical scales, the footwork in dance. And, when people learn that way, they get tremendous authenticity and genuineness. And you still learn the theory, but it's not from the teacher lecturing the theory at you. It's from the teacher coming up with very effective exercises that have the theory baked in. And the more you practice scales, the more you pick up musical theory. And likewise, if the teacher comes up with exercises that are effective, not from acting, not from music, but from actual practice of leadership, from actual practice of business, which business could be for-profit, not-for-profit, could be community organizing. But I take exercises from leadership and give you exercises that are a little easier, but giving you the skills and in the process, giving you the theory. So it took a long time to come up with these exercises. Marshall Goldsmith, a mentor of mine, he has a few of them, and working with him, he had a couple of models that were great, and they're in my book. I use a couple of his, and he's happy for me to use them. And then there's also a style of leadership that goes back over a century to John Dewey and Maria Montessori. So I could fall back on techniques that have been developed for a long time. So that's part of how it all came together.
And what we're going to do is we're going to take another quick commercial break here. When we come back, Joshua, I want to get into more specifically around this model and how you're taking this model out, because you're doing coaching and mentoring now. So when we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation, but also ask Joshua to give a couple pieces of advice to leaders out there on how to think differently about how you learn to be really great leaders. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. We're live here in the studio in Colorado. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio. This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations, but before we hop into this next segment, I want to just do another shout out to one of our sponsors. HP has just recently come on as a sponsor for the show. We're still in the final stages of doing all the setup. We actually are testing out some new server gear and that here in the studio that HP is providing for us. Some of you may say, okay, hold on, Phil, you got to be biased, right? Yes, I was the CTO at HP, left for 5 years. HP's never really sponsored the show. We did a couple little experiments while I was CTO with the show with them. But this is them coming back on. They're a regular sponsor like any other sponsor. And as I've shared with you, we don't take on sponsors unless it's companies and products and technologies that we use. The entire studio, which was designed by somebody else, not by me, was all HP gear beforehand. We're just now doing upgrades and refreshes on that. So check it out. You can hop on over to killerinnovations.com/HP. Find out more about the sponsorship, and then as we get a little closer in and actually getting it all set up and launched, we'll be able to share some specific benefits for you, the listener, with purchases over at HP. So don't go anywhere, and we'll share that as soon as we have that available. So let's continue on our conversation with Joshua Spodek. Joshua, we were just coming out of that last segment and talking about the differences between what you learned in MBA and what you've learned really kind of through the whole process of watching how actors are able to really do that social connection and really build those kinds of rapport and empathy and relationships. And now you've kind of solidified this into kind of a thinking, because now you're doing coaching, you're doing mentoring, you've written a book. So when you boil all this up, what is it that's kind of your thoughts, your philosophy on how do you innovate teaching leadership and entrepreneurship today?
Well, from an entrepreneurial perspective, I feel like there's a practice that's been very effective in another area, and it works very well, and there's a demand for it in leadership. And so I didn't create something new from scratch. I took something that worked somewhere else and applied here and brought it here. And as an entrepreneur, I think that's a great business model. Take something that works in one place, bring it to where there's demand.
Steal from the best.
In the process, and so in the process, NYU hired me to start teaching there. So I started teaching there, and that got me a lot of experience in front of a lot of students. And the big thing for me, and by the way, the students consistently, my class is the first time they've ever taken an experiential class. If we taught these other fields like acting or piano, like we teach leadership, we would have, we'd put people in a room with 20 or 30 people and lecture about musical theory to them. And at the end, commencement would mean that now you can sit down at a keyboard and start playing piano. But no one would learn that way. And so it's really, you start with exercises that are very simple, not always easy, but simple. And the next one builds on that, and the next one builds on that, and the next one builds on that. And I structure it, the leadership class has 4 units. There's Understand Yourself, which is about self-awareness and mindfulness. Then there's Lead Yourself, which is about creating habits and getting advice from others so that you can improve. Understand Others, which is the 3rd unit, is about taking what you've learned about yourself and extrapolating that to other people. A lot of people feel like they've learned a lot in the first 2 units about themselves. A lot of that is about them, but a lot of that is about humans in general. And leaders work with emotions and motivations. And the last part is leadership, leading others. And that's the part that most people like the most, which is it's behaving and communicating in ways so that other people feel comfortable sharing the motivations that they have, that were there before they ever came to your team, and connecting those interests, those passions, those motivations and emotions to the task. And when you do that as a leader, first of all, from their perspective, now that task has meaning. And they'll be working, you may think that they're working for you, but internally they're really working for themselves. And that motivation, it gives them a sense of ownership and they really like it. And the last piece of it is to support people. You can motivate someone and even inspire someone in 5 minutes. But if the project takes 6 months or a year, you have to keep supporting them all that time. So conflict resolution and making sure they have resources available and stuff like that. And each one of these things, I'm telling you what it's about, but it's really in the course, you do things that instead of me giving you the answer, you find and develop an answer for yourself.
So Joshua, you said this, it's an experiential learning. Give us a taste for what one of these experiences that a student would have in one of these areas. When you say experiential learning, what's the experience that they have?
So there's a lot of different ones because the book has 20 chapters. So I'll pick one. The one that I do the most when I do corporate events is meaningful connection. So it's how to make a meaningful connection with someone. And I give you a script that you follow. And first you do it in a group with people that you know, and you follow the script and you go through the process of what generates a meaningful connection with someone. So you ask them, what's a passion of yours, or what's something that you like to do? They'll give you an answer, but that answer is usually still pretty guarded, what I call a cocktail party answer, because for them to share what deep inside makes them vulnerable. So how do you make someone feel comfortable sharing what they're normally vulnerable about? It's not just asking, what's your passion? They'll give you an answer. And you don't have to say what's something you do, what's something you like to do. They'll give you an answer. It won't have that much depth. The next thing to do is to make them feel comfortable. What I do in meaningful connection exercise, and you follow script to do it the first couple of times. You say, oh, I know someone who does something like that. And you talk about someone who does, like say the person says cooking. I might then say, oh, my mom is a good cook. She cooks, and the reason she cooks is that she likes to bring communities together. I like to cook because I'm into fitness and I like to make healthy food. What is it for you? Now, it sounds like I've talked about two people in my life, and I have, but what I've also done is I've spoken supportively, non-judgmentally about people in my life, about what you do. And what that makes you feel like on the other side, at least when people do it with me, the way I feel is I feel like, oh, I can share with this person because they support that person, and those people, they'll also support me. So then you get almost always you get a significantly longer answer. A lot of times when I do these exercises in corporate environments, people will say, I've been working with these people for 5 years. I know them really well. I'm not going to get anything new. They always get something new. Having beers with someone doesn't mean that they feel comfortable being vulnerable with you.
Right, exactly.
Showing them that you support them, that allows them to let that out.
Well, and it's interesting, I came from a CTO background, and now, going up on 5 years here, June 1st, being a CEO. But it is interesting of how little, unless you make that effort, how little you really know your people, what really makes them tick. And more importantly, how do you align their interests, passions, and motivators? It's not always title and money, right? That everybody thinks about as the motivator. If I dangle that carrot out there, that's how I lead the mice, to do the work. It's really understanding what is that thing inside that I can understand and empathize with and align with what the overall organizational objective is to what their motivation is. But you got to get past this. I like the comment you made about it's the cocktail party answer.
Yeah. What you were saying about money and authority, those are important tools for management, and management leaders have to know how to manage as well. But I wouldn't say that those are properties of leadership. Leadership is much more working with emotions.
Yep.
And if you don't have the skills to elicit those emotions and to work with them, you're basically managing. Not the worst thing in the world, but you can't manage someone into doing something to feel passionate about something. You can lead someone there, and it takes a lot of practice. At the beginning, the first time people do this stuff, they ask me, isn't that manipulating people, attaching their emotions to things? After they do the exercises, they look back and they say, trying to motivate people with money, that's manipulation. That's not what they're really doing the stuff for. But when I really get at what those emotions are, then I can lead them.
So, Joshua, we're going to wrap up here because we're going to come up on a commercial break, and I want to give enough time. So your book is called Leadership Step by Step. It's available now, right? Is it out?
Yep.
So it's available, I'm assuming, at Amazon and any place anybody wants to get both.
Yep, and we hit bestseller on Amazon, proud to say.
Hey, that is fantastic. I looked at it the other day real quickly, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I will, so that's just my confession to the listeners. But great reviews on the book, and if people want to follow you and keep up with where you're at, what's the best way they can find you?
So on the professional side, there's spodekacademy.com, SPODEK academy.com. And because I mentioned the meaningful connection exercise, then I'll create spodikacademy.com/KI, which will give for Killer Innovations, which will give you access to see me doing that exercise on video with an excerpt from the book, actually with Marshall Goldsmith. So spodikacademy.com/KI. And then also give links to all my social media.
Perfect. And we'll put all that up on the show notes. Joshua, thanks a lot for taking time out of your Sunday to join us. I greatly appreciate that. Don't go anywhere. We're going to wrap up the show in the next segment. Got some new updates to give you on some things going on. So stay right where you're at. We'll be right back after this commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalk Radio. This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. This is Phil McKinney. Wanted to spend a few minutes with you, just kind of one-on-one, to give you an update on a couple things that we're working on here. As you know, a couple months back, we announced, or at least I announced, that all of my content, whether it be the radio show, the podcast, my book, everything, I'm licensing it over to a new company called the Innovators Network. The CEO is Mark Vercioni, a longtime friend. And that work is still underway. Actually, it's going incredibly well. And Kim McNicholas, who many of you know, she's been on this show many times. Kim is an award-winning journalist, formerly with Forbes, and runs the Extreme Tech Challenge for Sir Richard Branson. Kim has also now aligned herself with the Innovators Network, and I'm actually an investor in that. So allowing then people to have more access to my content, my materials, my workshops, etc. And one of the things that we get a constant request for is for people that want to teach those courses, who want to take, for instance, the Innovation Bootcamp or the 7 Laws of Innovation course that I just taught in Auckland, New Zealand 6 weeks ago or so. I get a lot of requests for people saying, hey, can I license that? Can I get trained on that so that I can teach it in Australia or Thailand or whatever? And actually, we're working very hard to get this set up so that if you are a consultant in the innovation space and you want access to the content and you want to be able to teach the workshops, all that kind of stuff, that is work that's underway. To kind of help that coming along, we are also standing up a community. Community meaning just true innovators, people who are in the innovation game, coming together to both collaborate, to share, to advise, to coach, to listen to each other rant and rave about the frustrations of trying to be an innovator inside of an organization. So that community is actually up and running. We've got it with a good core set of people. We are about to open that up to more people, to make it more broadly available, primarily focusing on the listeners. If you've been a long-time listener to this show, my guess is you're in the innovation game. Otherwise, I'm not sure why you're listening to the show. So from that standpoint, we will be growing the community. This will be the best way for me to be able to do one-on-one coaching and mentoring is via this community. I will be very active in it. It doesn't matter where I'm at in the world. I can always be connected and be part of this community. And the community will replace my one-on-one coaching and mentoring. I can't scale that. It becomes really problematic with my travel schedules to try to take on any more coaching and mentoring or one-on-one. So the community will be the replacement. So if you're listening to this show and you are interested in becoming part of this community, just drop me an email. Just go to phil@killerinnovations.com and say, hey, Phil, I heard about the community. I would love to check it out. I think there's a landing page that's set up right now. I'm going to give you a URL. If it doesn't work, don't yell at me. It'll be up soon. And it's called theinnovators.network. Community. So it's theinnovators.community. And you can read, there's some information there about how the community is going to work, etc. So you can go over and check that out. The other thing is as I've announced previously, the Killer Question card deck is out. It's available. You can buy it. It's actually going incredibly well. The feedback has been phenomenal. And we've got some reviews, all of them 5 stars so far for those people that have received their card decks. This is actually what the card deck looks like. So check it out. You can go over to innovation.tools and read up on them, see what they're all about. It's the volume 1. This is what this is. It's the first set of questions. And these are the questions that I use myself. These are the ones I use every day. These are the ones I've used to create all the products and services that I've had for the last umpteen number of years. Now, there's additional ones that I'll be putting out in future volumes. But this is kind of the foundational set. So hop on over to innovation.tools and you can purchase those and check those out. Eventually, the hope is that if there's enough interest in the card deck, we'll actually produce more of them. We've just done a limited volume right now, so if you want them, you got to get over and get those because they're going pretty quickly. If there is enough interest, we'll actually purchase them and we'll get them, up on Amazon or something to make it a little easier for people, particularly those outside of North America. You can buy those international. We're shipping them international. It's a little bit of an additional charge. It's free shipping in the U.S., and there's a little bit of an additional charge for shipping outside the U.S. So we are making them available globally, so feel free. Hop on over. Just go to innovation.tools, Tools. That's the online store where you can find all kinds of books, posters, all kinds of things to help you build up your skills or provide tools for your innovation efforts. The other is I just want to put another plug in for the sponsors. Sponsors are important for us. One is it just helps cover the cost. We've been bearing the 100% of the cost for producing the podcast now for 13 years. A few of you have actually sent in donations to PayPal, over the years. Just I think out of your generosity, I've greatly appreciated that, just to help pay for a little bit of server cost and et cetera. But we've been bearing the cost 100%. And Zoom and HP have partnered up with us to cover the cost for, not salaries, but the actual operating costs, because we don't run this as kind of a big, for-profit kind of opportunity. And through this sponsorship, it's allowing me to free up money to actually allocate to the charities, hackingautism.org or pioneer.education. So to Zoom and HP, greatly appreciate you coming alongside. The way you can help is if you go over, if you're using Zoom or using HP or you're looking for something, go check them out. And if you do interact with them, let them know where you heard about them. Tell them that you heard about it over here at Killer Innovations, and just thank them for their support of the show and also for the charities that we sponsor. And with that, if you got any questions, feedback, thoughts, etc., drop me a note over at phil@killerinnovations.com. And as always, the show notes will be available over at killerinnovations.com. Podcast comes out on Tuesday each and every week. We greatly appreciate it. We'll talk to you next Sunday. Bye-bye.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. Biz Talk Radio.